Okay, good. All right, we will get started in just a moment. I know we're live right now, but we're going to start in just a moment. Letting everybody sort of get into the Facebook Live here.
Cam, I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
I hear you loud and clear. You, me?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, excellent. All right. I think we're ready to start.
Yeah, let's roll.
All right, welcome everyone to the second in our new series of what we call the Real Estate Wealth Network Strategy Lab. I am joined by my good friend, co-host, and business partner, Mr. Josh Brown. Say hey to Josh.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good stuff. We're the purpose of these Facebook Live events, and then they end up on the blog as a recording. So if you're watching us live on Facebook, that's great. And if you're watching us on the blog, excellent. Glad you were able to make it and see the recording. The purpose of these gatherings is to several things. Number one, to give you a place to come where you are, welcome and safe and can learn from what we're learning and from what other folks within our community are learning. You're part of a community that is the Real Estate Wealth Network. You're always welcome here, and you're like family. So I'm excited to have the ability to do this. I'm excited to have the time to do this, although that's a little tricky. You know, you might think, Cam, what could you possibly be doing? And I'm saying to myself, I'm working about 14 hours a day, 7 days a week right now. But I'm not complaining. I'm loving it. And with regard to, getting stuff accomplished and making the time to do things like this when I might otherwise be traveling, not doing much of that. Josh and I were talking the other day. I said, man, it feels so weird. I don't look at my calendar to see when I'm traveling next because I'm not. In fact, unfortunately, if you're paying attention to our live events, our Rapid Results Investor Summit, or our Doing Deals live events, we did just have to cancel a couple of more. We canceled Phoenix that was in May, and the Doing Deals live. Where was that, Josh? What city was that in again?
I was in Dallas in May also.
Yeah. So we just made the decision that there was really no way to proceed with that and be prudent and not make a financial blunder, in terms of the planning and execution of the event. It's very costly. In fact, I feel awful for people in the event business, certainly the restaurant business, any sort of hospitality. Of course, I'm deep in that myself. I'll talk about that in a minute, but any business that relies and survives on events of any kind is just on its back like a turtle right now, like so many other businesses. It's just shocking. I think we'll be lucky if our unemployment rate when we come out of this is less than 20%. My hope is that everybody who's laid off right now is going to get called back, but the longer this goes on, I think the fewer businesses that are actually going to be able to survive. It's a scary time, and make no mistake about it. I'm nervous. I've got my hotel I closed. We closed a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago. So a week ago Sunday we closed, and I did temporary layoffs with the entire staff. My revenue is exactly zero. My expenses are slashed, thanks in large part to the bank doing a deferral, which they that didn't work out quite as well as I thought it would, but the jury's still out on it. I'm pushing hard. But the good news is at least I have a payment holiday. And so my expenses are, cut to nearly nothing, which is good. But my revenue is cut to exactly nothing. So I'm feeling it in terms of the hospitality business. I'd like to think that when we come out of this thing, there'll be pent up demand and restaurants and hotels and everything will just come roaring back. But I kind of wonder if, we're not changing as a society in a lot of ways that might mean that doesn't happen. I don't know. So before we dig into your questions and your comments that we asked you to submit, and we've got many, in fact, many more than we'll ever have time to get to today. I wanted to do just a sort of my take on our situation, and I wanted to bring you a few things that I've distilled out of the news. I consume an enormous amount of news and information right now. I'm working 14 hours a day, and I'm not exaggerating with that, but a lot of that is consuming and learning and expanding my thinking and really trying to, take time now to grow my brain, which I hope you're doing as well. This is a good time to be studying. And what I think you'll find is that I do a lot of that, and maybe, the research I'm doing is research for you. Consider me a researcher if you'd like. So a couple things. One is within the mortgage industry, there's all sorts of developments, but non-qualifying, non-QM mortgages or loans are now off the table. They were literally turned off like a light switch, just off. And in case you're wondering what non-QM means, it's those are loans made to non-owner occupants, self-employed borrowers, borrowers with substantial assets but limited income, jumbo loan borrowers, investors in general. There are no mortgages to be had out there at all, period. So really the only thing that is being written right now is government insured. So FHA, VA, USDA loans are continuing. But for the most part, entry level and maybe some move up houses, but they would all have to fall below whatever's considered a jumbo loan in your market. And that varies. It's pretty high, but in some markets, it's not that high at all. So what that means to us is that, any buyers that we might be, selling to that would normally finance the transaction through some institutional lender. And, if you're a wholesaler, a rehabber, or a buy and holder, there really aren't that many buyers doing that. But in case you are selling to someone who's in that situation, that mortgage is canceled midstream. Now, I have a house. This is more on the end of my list, but I'll mention it now. I have a house under contract in South Florida to sell. It's a rental home that I've owned for more than 10 years. I'm selling it at what I presume will be the high. And just as recently as this morning, I confirmed that everything is go. The buyer is still employed. It's an FHA loan. I did have to do some seller concessions to help the buyer cover closing costs. But that was all built into the negotiation that we did, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I do expect this buyer to close on or about the 10th. The mortgage, the lending officer, the mortgage broker, whatever you want to call it. I haven't talked to her, but it is, again, an FHA loan. She's saying that everything is on target. The appraisal came in. It appraised, actually higher than the purchase price, which is great when you're a buyer. I don't care. I'm getting what I want. And so I kind of look at that deal. It's extraordinarily conventional in that it's an FHA buyer. But I kind of look at that deal as my personal canary in the coal mine, because I'd like to see that close. Really like to see that close, because I have that sold at about 4.5 times what I paid for it. So clearly for the reason of, the taking the gain off the table, I'd really like to see that close. But then I also have some tax appetite this year where the cap gains and recaptured depreciation, I think I can offset. So I'm really hoping to get that closed. I have another house on the market in the same area, and there's still a lot of interest, a lot of showings and all of that. But here's what's going on in New York with real estate right now. They don't even want you showing a house. They don't want you going in a house. Realtors basically shut down. The state of New York is, if you're watching the news, is the epicenter of this whole thing. Certainly not where I am. Where I live in a town of 700 people where, there's they say there's 25,600 people per square mile in the New York, the 5 boroughs of New York. Up here, it's probably, 25 people per square mile. So, we have very, very few cases of coronavirus here. but New York in general is the epicenter. And unfortunately, what Cuomo decides for New York gets decided for the whole state. And that's really frustrating. So, in New York State right now, real estate is has come to a grinding halt. And in addition to that, what they did in New York, and it may come in some other states, is on Friday this past. So today is Thursday, April 2nd. This past Friday, so 6 days ago, Cuomo shut down construction almost entirely. I can have one person on the job site, and then there's some other little variances, but basically construction got completely shut down in the state of New York. And for me, that's a problem because we're in the middle of building a new house, and I've got an extremely antsy wife. We're living in a rental house that she does not like being in. And now this project just got dragged out. Who knows how much longer? So it's coming at me from every angle. And every time I see another notice in my email, or I see, Cuomo on the news, I'm pointing over here because there's a TV right over there. I think, oh, what's coming now? Who's going to, how's this going to impact me? And, I'm trying to stay in good spirits and all, and I'm kind of jovial about it right now, but it's a tough time. I'm here to tell you. It's a tough time. By the way, did you see the other night, Trump was saying that, it was a real solemn moment. He was saying that he expects, the death rate on this thing to skyrocket. Boom. And I'm sitting there thinking, how's that possible? But, I don't know. Scary times for sure. But I remain comforted by the fact that we will prevail. And on the other side of this storm are some very blue skies and a lot of opportunity. I have not wavered from that, nor will I, because I know it is a fact. It's just kind of a question of how long we're going to be stuck in this storm before we get to those blue skies. And that's the unknown. And, who likes the unknown? Not me either. Okay, more in the news. I mentioned this last week on our strategy lab, but I wanted to mention again, and there's some new interesting developments. iBuyers have stopped buying. So that includes Zillow Offers, Open Door, Knock, Perch, OfferPad, and all the other iBuyers, which I've always considered that to mean institutional buyers, but I've also heard that it also means instant buyers. Either way, they're done. And in fact, I read an article about Zillow canceling existing contracts with sellers, where in one particular example where they interviewed the seller for the article, Zillow had put a $1,000 earnest money deposit on the deal. They were canceling the contract and giving the seller not only that $1,000, but $4,000 more. So basically paying the seller to not pursue them effectively, because you could always try and pursue them, and Zillow's got deep pockets, but I think they're basically buying out their contracts if canceling them is too strong a word. So I found that interesting. So what that means to you is that competition is off the table, and who knows when it'll be back, if ever. That may have been a wave, a fad that we saw once during the run up to 2020 and may never see again. I don't know. I do know that there's little to any possibility of iBuyers coming out of this unscathed. I think because of the volume they were buying at, the narrow margins they were buying at, and the volume they were buying at leading right up till now is only going to put them in a position where they are going to get hurt by this as well. So that's that. Hard money lenders. There were some questions in our list here about hard money lenders. A couple comments on that. I had a long conversation with a big hard money lender in the last few days, and they are either recoiling entirely and stopping, or they're staying in and continuing to lend or offer or say they're continuing to lend, but at increased rates. So you can expect hard money to become more expensive as we navigate our way through this. I will add that hard money during the last, at least 5 years was the least expensive I've seen it in the 27 years I've been doing this business. So, that was kind of due for a reset or a correction as well. So you heard me say this before. I'll say it again. Real estate is very cyclical. It's like the pendulum in a grandfather clock. And so I want to make sure I remind you of this. When the market is changing, we change what we do. And that's really what we're here to talk about. And through your questions and answers, we're going to really flesh that out. But we're kind of in a state of flux right now, but I can assure you that as we move forward, we're going to do things a little differently in terms of, what we're willing to pay, the strategies we pursue, and where the competition is. Right? We just finished up probably one of the strongest, biggest sellers markets in the history of American real estate. We're now likely to head into an extraordinarily strong buyer's market. And so the pendulum is swinging. Like I said, I'm doing a ton of reading, listening, and generally researching the situation. Like I said before, this is a really good time to study and to learn. And while you're hunkered down, to use that time wisely and in a way that serves you. So, if you want to, you can also consider me your sort of, ad hoc researcher. How about that? So an observation from the last week of, all the news that's going on, and it changes hourly. I'm afraid to actually look at my, at my notifications, my news feed and stuff. But I think it's safe to say, I was kind of putting this in perspective. There's no way we're going to come out of this without being in a recession, maybe a depression. We'll see. But what's so interesting to me is that it's self-imposed. We chose this course of action. Now, what other course of action would there be? I don't know. But the point is, we chose this. And I can't help but wonder if if in the future we look back and we say the cure was far more costly than the disease. I don't know. But I think it's notable that the world basically decided to go into a worldwide recession. And you might also say that, this is a sort of almost financial suicide that we're committing here. And I think that is, it's more than notable. It's shocking, but, it's certainly justified. So some predictions. I think we're going to see a pretty significant decline in public gathering spaces and their popularity. That would be private sector and government gathering places. I think people are going to be a lot more leery about that. I think we will see, and this one directly impacts us as investors, a wave of people moving from densely populated, dense living environments to less dense urban areas, or a sort of de-urbanization or suburbanization moving forward. I think we will see large apartment buildings, high-rise skyscraper apartment buildings, 32-unit, 10-unit apartment buildings, less desirable, and single-family houses, detached single-family housing, becoming much more desirable. And, I'd say for at least the last 10 years, what I've been teaching you is to focus on entry-level single-family houses. And that, I now know, was very good advice, and I will not waver from that. So, I live where I live is sort of, people who live in BFE call where I live BFE. Okay. And so if you can follow that logic, and don't ask me to tell you what BFE stands for, go look it up on Urban Dictionary or something. But what's going to happen, I think, is places like this are going to become more popular. People are going to leave the densely populated environments. And as a rule, my thinking is that we may want to, as investors, avoid anything with an elevator. Elevators are scary. In fact, elevators are why Cuomo killed construction in New York last Friday, because there were some union workers on a project in New York City when construction of any kind was still, considered essential. They complained that they were on these long elevator rides going up to the top floor of this construction project in very close quarters with other construction workers. I mean, think about it. If you're in an elevator with have you ever ridden in an elevator with more people than you thought it was ever designed to hold? That's kind of what I'm getting at. And so I think elevators are going to be we're gonna evolve out of this thing. We're gonna kind of resurface out of this situation, and people are not gonna like elevators. As it is, the elevator button is probably the dirtiest thing in the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. Elevators. So I had a conversation with the general manager at my hotel. It's 3-4 hotel. We have an elevator. We have to for ADA. And I said, let's start thinking about how we, talk about the elevator. Maybe we encourage guests to take the stairs, or maybe we limit the number of people in the elevator at any one time to just you, or you and your spouse, or you and your spouse and 2 kids, and the other family please wait, and take them, that kind of thing. And, we do something to overtly keep the button clean. So that's stuff I've been thinking about.
I think you're right on that, Cam. I think you're right. Like, just like shaking hands for the foreseeable future, even after we're past all this later this year or next year, whenever, we're always going to think twice now about the germs in somebody's hand, even though we've been shaking hands forever. And that's a change that's going to come from this. And I think you're right. Touching elevator buttons and grocery cart, shopping cart handles. I mean, they got a person at our local grocery store spraying the handles every time right in front of you. As you take it, they spray it so you know it's clean. There's a lot of these small little changes are going to change the way we operate as humans with each other.
Yeah. So I saw this meme on Facebook. It was all about how it was like the handshake, most risky, high five, less risky. And then this gesture, no risk whatsoever. And I think you know what that gesture was. I thought, I got a kick out of that. So some other customs and norms that I think will change. The handshake is one. I see that going away. That's an old custom that is probably one of the ones that contributes the most to people being sick. Mm-hmm. I think we'll see an increase of loneliness. I think this social distancing and shut-in situation is creating a great loneliness for some people. My mother-in-law, who's 88 years old, hasn't stepped out of her house in 3 weeks, and no one has stepped inside for 3 weeks. And I talked to her yesterday on the phone for quite a while, and she's lonely. And I don't blame her. My wife and daughter and I, we've made it, we're not supposed to, but we've gone over there a couple of times when we have to go to the grocery store, and we stand in the yard and talk to her. She's 88 years old. You talk about high risk. Right. And, she's on meds and stuff that compromise her immune system. So I think that we will see a sort of an epidemic of loneliness extend way beyond what we're in right now. If you are a business owner, you may have relief through the SBA through loans. There is the Payroll Recovery Act. It's called PPP. It's something that we're going to utilize, and then looking at some other programs for the hotel. But keep your eyes focused on this, multi-trillion-dollar bailout package, and how you as a business owner might be able to benefit and get your hands on some of this money. And if it's done right and you document it clearly, the loan can be completely forgivable. And maybe if some of it you end up with that's not forgivable, you give it back. There's no prepayment penalty. So there is money out there, and the helicopter money is coming for, those of you where your income falls below the levels that are now, out in the public. That's coming as well. And that's the end of my list for things I wanted to talk about in terms of the state of the state, if you will, on this particular strategy lab. So, Josh, you got anything to add to that before we jump into the questions?
No, I think you did a great job. One of the things that I hear, a lot of your updates were some of the news updates for the week. And I think a lot of people can hear some of that stuff and get scared. I tend to look at those things and say, like, okay, so if conventional money is drying up, then where's the opportunity? So I think for those of you watching right now, don't let a lot of these things passing make you think, oh, well, then this business isn't doable anymore. It still is. And, as investors, we've always been creative. We've always had to say, if this stream, if hard money lenders are too expensive, well, now what? private money lenders, right? So you find another avenue, and that's exactly what we're doing. And we're going to talk, we have a lot of questions today that'll take us down the road of what are the other avenues right now as we see it. But I just wanted to point that out, that I see a lot of these things happening, and I don't immediately get scared. I just kind of try to absorb it and then think about it rationally and say, okay, so then what is the next option? How do we do this? So
it's a great point. 27 years of being in this business, what I've done consistently through all of those 27 years, although in certain periods of time in a much more concentrated way, is pivot and just look for a solution. I'm not unique. You are too. We are all creative problem solvers. And you mentioned, lending and conventional lending, and a lot of the sectors of conventional lending drying up. I think we're only seeing the beginning of that. I think the Fed, as part of the bailout, is buying mortgage-backed securities, including multifamily properties, and I think they think that's helping. But if you focus on the mortgage industry from at a deep level, it's not helping. It's actually hurting. So we'll see how it all plays out. But what I wanted to mention to you is since the last one of our strategy labs, I just secured a private lender on a deal that I'm working on, and the private lender was thrilled, and I'm paying 4%. And right now, by the way, on a jumbo CD, the rate is 2.5. So that's better than it's been, but 4%. At 4%, it's cheap money for me as an investor. I couldn't get it for that at a bank if it was available, and it now isn't. But it's huge money to the private lender over what this person would have gotten through a similar low risk investment. This is a first mortgage on a piece of income property, and so I'm basically pulling some cash out of a deal is what I'm doing, and plugging in a private lender who's thrilled to have the opportunity, and I'm gathering more dry powder, as you might say. So all right, let's dig in.
Yeah.
By the way, before we do, we are doing these strategy labs on Thursdays. A couple quick things. If you attend the Deal Maker webinars on the first and third Tuesday of the month, this is preempting that. So next week, we would have a Deal Maker webinar on Tuesday at 1:00 Eastern. This will preempt that. And I'm asking you to join me on next week's strategy lab, because I don't really have the time to try to do this twice in 1 week, or I should say twice in 2 weeks for the next month. So in an effort to keep everything balanced, this will take the place of the Deal Maker webinar. So that's one little piece of housekeeping. The other, at any point, you can send an email to comments, plural, COMMENTS, comments at Real Estate Wealth Network, with a comment or a question for us to address on the next strategy lab. That's how we do this. So if you're watching this live on Facebook right now, there's how you can get a question or comment in for next week. We are full for this week, certainly. In fact, we have more than we'll ever get to. Or if you're watching this on the blog as a replay, that's how you'll do it. We also ask you, please, for your comments now live on Facebook, please put your comments in during this and tell us what you're thinking and how you're feeling about it. And maybe you've got something to add to something I've said. Please be part of this. Take an active role in this. And if you're watching this on the blog, you can leave comments below. Just the same. It's a little different than Facebook. On Facebook, I hope you're liking this and you're putting your comments in there in real time. That tells us if what we're doing is worthwhile, and we need to know that. We need that sort of confirmation, validation, and to hear from you in that way. And at the blog, just scroll down and you'll see you can leave a comment right there as well. Please do that.
Yeah. It felt great last week to see everybody commenting and like chiming in and, backing us up or adding little nuanced differences to some of the points we were making. And as I went back and watched it after it was all over with and was looking at the comments, your input really did help make it an even more powerful session. So please add your comments below, add your thoughts below, like this thing, share this video if you think it could help somebody else who's in the real estate space or needs to hear a positive message in this time right now. We'd love it, and it can only help you. So.
Okay. So I'll start, Josh, and then maybe we'll switch back and forth, however you want to do it.
Sure.
So this is from I Buy Houses with Cash. You know, your name's not in your email, and that, you know, you might want to think about that from a business perspective. But the question is, with businesses shutting down, what do we do when title companies are closed and or local governments are not available to post transfer of ownership? So yeah, in some markets, you know, the courthouse or the county annex is closed, and you know, the paralegal can't even get in there to record a deed. You know, I am not worried about that. I realize it does create a sort of a log jam in terms of the flow, but I'm not worried about it from a legal or a privacy or an asset protection standpoint. I think that that everything is going to get done as soon as it can get done, and it'll all go according to the book. Mm-hmm. I also think that what we're seeing right now is an extraordinary level of empathy from everywhere possible. So I would not let that bother you. It'll all get done in due time, and I would not let that stop you to the extent that it doesn't. You know, look, if you're in New York right now, it's pretty tough to do real estate, but there's nothing stopping you from talking to sellers and putting a plan together for how you're going to buy their house as soon as you can. There's nothing stopping you from putting it under contract. That's one of the questions in here. How would you do that? How would you, you know, and this is a question that if you're thinking of doing this business virtually, meaning from home in another area or from home in your area, you're going to want to get comfortable with the idea of digital documentation like DocuSign or Dotloop. And there's nothing stopping you from putting a house under contract right now using Dotloop or DocuSign or any one of the other digital signature tools. And those agreements are binding. So don't let things being shut down stop you from moving forward, especially when it comes to marketing and talking with sellers and moving toward transactions.
Totally agree.
All right.
I've got a question here from Don O. He says, Debbie and I joined this past weekend. Look forward to learning a lot. I've been looking at various programs for about a month. My biggest holdback right now is putting things in order on how to get started. What's the first thing we should be doing? You know, it's a great question. And I know that it's tough in any market and in any situation to kind of start something new and know what's the first thing that you should be doing. In my opinion, the first thing you should be doing is contacting motivated sellers. Get on the motivated seller data feed. Start calling sellers. You know, are there other little things you could do? Get your website set up, sure. And that's all sort of office work type stuff. But in terms of ramping up your business, start calling sellers now. You need to be calling them every day. If you got nothing else to do, if you're sitting at home with hours on end, you know, schedule yourself a couple hours a day to be calling sellers and talking to them and seeing how you can help them and what situation they're in. And maybe they do want an offer now or when this whole thing clears up. And you want to make sure that you've started contacting them now, because what's going to happen is if you guys wait until everything's all clear, you're just waiting until the water's crystal clear for everybody. You want to start calling now because other people are fearful. And when people are fearful, what do? They freeze. Right?
Yeah, they snap into their shells.
Yep. Scared people don't move. And you've got to push past whatever bit of fear is there. It's not going to cost you anything real to start calling people, talking to them, and seeing if they're interested. And if they are, like Cam was saying earlier, everyone I've talked to on the planet so far since this started has been understanding of the fact that we're all going through this together. So you used to talk to a seller and say, you know, are you interested in a cash offer? Yes. And then say, make me an offer. And you'd have to hurry up and make them an offer. Well, guess what they're giving you now? More time. Why? Because the world's different. I need some time to figure this out. Let me see if I can find a way to get by there. Let me see, do you have FaceTime? You can show me the house. There's a lot of ways you can get creative with that. But people are understanding. Don, I would say start contacting motivated sellers now. Find people that say, yes, make me an offer, and then start working through the calculations that we talked about in the last strategy lab, how to determine those prices. So there you go.
All right. Here's one from Florida Investor, whoever you are. What's the best way to get pre-foreclosure owners to accept a subject to offer? The best way I know of is to be sure that they're truly motivated. Now, if they're in a pre-foreclosure situation, they just got a little reprieve, right? Especially if it's a government-backed loan. FHA and HUD foreclosures have been, basically stopped for 90 days. But if what you want is for that seller to be motivated enough to be willing to write a hardship letter because, well, no, sorry, subject to, I'm thinking of a short sale. Subject to, you want that seller to be motivated enough to be willing to walk away from their house for what they owe on it and you to take over their payments. So motivation and trust. Motivation on their part and trust in you is what will do that.
Absolutely. Question here on Ringless voicemail from Brett. He says, the Ringless voicemail you talked about in your recent video was intriguing. What providers of this service are available, and have you found any more superior than others? How would you go about using this service to benefit us now and in the future? The service we use and like a lot is called slybroadcast.com. You guys can check it out, SLY broadcast.com. And what Ringless voicemail is, for those of you who either missed the previous video or have no idea what that means. Have you ever had your cell phone sitting near you and all of a sudden a voicemail pops up and you're thinking, I didn't even hear that darn thing ring? Well, that's a service that you can buy. And what it does is you can upload phone numbers to it, record a voicemail message, and send it to phone numbers, and it'll just skip the ringing process and leave a voicemail. What that does is it sort of gets around the cold call, because now for me to get the message, I have to go into my messages, listen to the call, and I hear someone say like, hey, this is Josh calling about your property. If you'd be interested in a cash offer, give me a call back. As the investor who initiated that Sly broadcast, now I'm only hearing back from interested parties, those who have raised their hand, the motivated seller. So that's why we use that. It's just sort of another way to contact your motivated sellers or cash buyers or whoever your targeted audience is, rather than cold calling, just straight off the cuff. How do I see it benefiting you? Well, it's always been a part of a marketing strategy. I personally don't believe in just taking all the phone numbers and Sly broadcasting them, because a lot less people respond to a Sly broadcast than will respond to a regular phone call, pick up the phone and talk to a human, right? So using this tool does take the humanity out of the process a little bit. And Cam and I have talked about the fact that, listen, if you want to be ahead right now, especially in this market, the one thing you can do that doesn't cost you anything right now is adding humanity back into the deal and into the process. And using Sly broadcast pulls away from that, but it is a good step in the marketing process. If you've sent some postcards and you've done some cold calling, you're still not getting responses, sending the Sly broadcast as one of the steps in your marketing plan does become a powerful tool, because that might be the one touch. We have to touch people 7 times. It might be the one touch that they needed, the one they finally listened to and they got around to their voicemails. So that's why we use it. That's how we use it, Brett, and hopefully that clears it up for you. It's not that expensive to test. So if you're an investor getting started and you want to try sending out 100 or so, it's not going to cost you very much money at all in terms of marketing costs. So it's something you can test and play with. And one thing I will say as a caveat is just be careful. You don't want to upload a humongous list and send those out without having tested to see what the responses are like, if your message is good, if it makes people angry, whatever. You want to always start with a small test group, see how the response goes, and then scale up from there. So that's how and why we use Ringless voicemail.
So where that question came from was the video I did 2 weeks ago, where I talked about one of our mentorship students in Jacksonville that had sent out, I want to say it was about 305 slide broadcast messages and got 19 responses. And that, that was notable because it's a much higher response rate than I think we might have seen just a month ago. So that's where
Yep.
that came from. All right. From Kelly, it says, will real estate prices plummet? There's a series of very short staccato style questions here. Will real estate prices plummet? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the benefit of hindsight. And I think that we are going to see a correction in real estate pricing, although it isn't going to happen overnight. It takes quite a while for sellers to come to the reality that they're not going to get what they thought they were going to get, and they're only going to get this, and then decide and come to grips with that. So
Yeah.
I think we could be looking at maybe a eight or so month, maybe 12-month sort of decline. And I was watching a thing the other night. I watch a lot of, I listen to a lot of stuff. I watch a lot of stuff. And this was about historical real estate trends and the whole historical macro view of it since 1890. And if you adjust prices for inflation from 1890 till now, and then make those adjustments along the way, there's kind of a straight line in terms of values. Real estate really hasn't, until recently, it really hasn't increased much in value when adjusted for inflation since 1890. However, we did see a big spike leading into 2008, and then it subsequently fell back to that straight line of back to basically what is zero. This was fascinating to me. And then, so from 2000, I don't know, 15, 14, 16, we've seen prices spike again, way, way up like a hockey stick. And now we're up here, and we're in what we're in. And if you look at what happened in 2000, the run up to 2008, and then what happened following that, if history repeats itself, we're going to head back about to that trend line, which is, according to what I was watching now, a 40% reduction. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. In fact, if you look at what happened in 2008, it wasn't until 2011 or even 12 before we really bottomed out, before we found the real bottom and started to level off. And so, it could be at least a year or more before we start to see values changing dramatically. And it could be a couple years or even more before we get to what is the new bottom. Again, adjusted for inflation. So if you didn't adjust for inflation, the 2008 spike came down to here, and now this spike is, probably going to come down to here. And the delta between those two in terms of average value is probably equal to the rate of inflation. So that's what I mean by when you adjust it for inflation, this low and this low come back to that baseline, again, adjusted for inflation. Is that how this is going to play out? I don't know. I do know that history tends to repeat itself, and the economic conditions that I think we're going to, when the dust settles, when we kind of come out of this, I think the economic conditions are going to be shocking. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in trouble and needing to sell their houses very quickly. Lenders are going to be in trouble. I think we're going to see another situation like 2008, and it might be worse. I don't know, but that's my gut. My gut is saying that. Should we wait on purchasing? I would suggest you wait on purchasing anything you intend to hold long term. And so, really what it comes down to right now, if you have a property under contract to purchase that you intend to hold, and it has a good rent to value ratio, meaning at least a 1% rent to value ratio, I'd have no qualms in proceeding, because that thing's going to cash flow nicely. And if the value changes a little bit over the next few years, so what? It's cash flowing nicely. Who cares? That's a long haul thing. But that's happening in linear markets. That's not happening in San Diego. That's not happening in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, because right now those prices are here and rents are here, and you do not have a good rent to value ratio. So the only property I would think to buy and hold at this time is one that has at least a 1% rent to value ratio or better, because in the end, it doesn't matter if the price goes up or down by some, because the thing's going to continue to cash flow. So
Right.
that's a metric I like to look at, so that's rent to value ratio. And that one says a lot. And in the markets where you can't get that 1% rent to ratio, we are not buying to hold right now. Now we might buy to wholesale and rehab, but I'm not buying to hold. That's for sure. The government is telling tenants they don't have to pay their rent for 3 months. Not in every state. In New York, Cuomo's saying, 3 months rent, rent vacation. And hopefully on the other side of that, the property owner is able to get some sort of a deferment from their lender. So it just sort of, it's a pass through more or less. No rent, no mortgage, good. And it lands on the lender. And so that's another area where I think lenders are really going to be the ones to take the hit on this thing. I heard a story about, and by the way, if you've been around me for the last 10 or more years, you've heard me talk about single family entry level houses, not multifamily houses. People say, why don't you have multifamily properties? And I've owned them. I've owned many of them over the years. I'm not interested. It's not the asset, or it's not it's not the type of property I want to own anymore. And because I learned some harsh lessons. And I heard a story about a lady in Dallas who was on social media freaking out. She has a 10-unit apartment building, and that is her sole source of income. And all 10 of her tenants had met and decided they were going on a rent strike and they were not going to pay. Well, if you're in a single family house, there's no rent. I mean, there's no opportunity for herd mentality or for a gang to surface. And so I'm not a fan of multifamily properties. I haven't been for a long time. I used to own them. I got my lessons. I learned my lessons. I haven't owned one since, I don't know, the mid 2000s is probably when I sold the last one I owned. And I'm glad now. If you own a multifamily property and your tenants decide to go on a rent strike, they form a mob, and you're the man or the woman. I hope you will have already had a conversation with your lender about some sort of relief. And so, because it's out there, it is out there, it's available, and you should be taking advantage of it, whether you're collecting your rent or not. How or will this affect getting loans to either purchase or rehab property going forward? I addressed that earlier. Will this be our year to shine? This will certainly be our year to react and respond to the changes that are imminent, and to change our strategies to match the market, to match the market. All right, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say on that last question, I do think that if your mindset is that you're going to look for the opportunities available and take action on them, then absolutely it's going to be a year to shine. But there's going to be a change. It's happening every day. There's a change in our world. So keeping your eyes open, staying alert, staying up to date. Look at Cam, a very successful guy, but he's constantly learning right now. He's decided the thing that can help him the most during this time, not the most, but one of the things that can help him the most is more new information, and taking that information, understanding what it means for the future of his business, his family, our business, all that stuff. You should do the same thing, and be looking for the opportunities that you can take advantage of, because if you sit still and do nothing, this will not be your year to shine, nor would it have been your year any year. You've got to still take action. And I think the key to that is finding how to have confidence right now, whatever it takes. If that means you can call up 100 cash buyers and find 3 that have told you they're still currently buying, so you've got 3 possible people who buy the offers you go make, go do that. Whatever it takes for you to have confidence, you need to find it and start moving. Question here from Tim Stern. Was wondering if anyone is getting more pushback than usual since this Corona scare. No more details on that. I'm assuming he means pushback from sellers, because I'm not sure what else he could mean there. I certainly haven't heard of any of our clients or customers, and we have a bunch who are still out there doing stuff, say like sellers aren't wanting to talk. So as far as I can tell, and we have access to lots of investors out there and kind of what they're doing. No one is complaining that sellers are pushing back right now.
I'm not hearing it.
Are they concerned? We're all concerned, but I don't think they're pushing back against investors.
I don't either. All right. So here's another one where your name is not part of your email. Kind of interesting. It's becoming evident that February 2020 house values will not be what, for example, April 2020 values will be. Would you suggest continuing to contact sellers and make offers, but possibly at 5% less than you might have 30 days ago? In other words, how do we adjust the Mayo formula? I answered this one last week. We don't adjust the formula. The formula never changes. What we do adjust is the after repair value, if we're going to adjust anything at all relative to the marketplace. And the cost of repairs, that could change relative to the marketplace. But so here's the thing. With wholesaling, the way it works is you buy it so cheap that your buyers can't refuse it. And that's always the case, regardless of what the market is presenting to us, regardless of whether values are going up or staying the same or going down. We want to buy it as cheap as we can. And if we don't put a lot of earnest money at risk, and we do build in an inspection contingency that might be much longer than, say, 7 days right now. In fact, I'll come back to some thoughts on contracts and how to maybe adjust your language a little bit given what we're dealing with here. Buy the house as cheap as you possibly can. Tie up as little earnest money as possible and put it out to your buyer's list. The worst case scenario is you lose your earnest money deposit. Now, right now, I don't think you're going to be buying too many properties from banks. I think they're completely freaking out, and they're probably not listing anything, and realtors are hardly showing much of anything right now because they don't want to be in people's houses. So we're primarily going to be dealing with private sellers right now, which gives us a lot of latitude in terms of earnest money deposits. It's with private sellers that we can have the very smallest earnest money deposits and the most relaxed contracts, because they're private sellers. They're not as savvy as bank sellers. They don't have the same kind of expectations or demands, and they're not jerks. So this is an opportunity to buy so cheap that your buyers can't refuse the deals. And by the way, I mentioned before that the what the heck was it called? I'm drawing a little bit. Non-QM mortgages, non-qualifying mortgages, off the table. And what that does is it makes the importance of cash buyers all that much greater. So access to cash buyers is becoming more important now than it was just a few weeks ago. I mean, it was important a few weeks ago, but now it's becoming critically important because buyers who might, say buy from you to rehab or buy from you to hold and rent can't get that financing right now, at least not through most conventional lenders, and hard money is really contracted, and what is available is much more expensive. So those cash buyers are now super critical to what we're doing. Yep. So a follow up here from the same person. Now doesn't feel like the right time to ramp up marketing campaigns. Can you give me some feedback on what you see the most effective marketing, since some of us must be extra careful with every dollar we spend right now? Of course, all of us need to be extra careful with every dollar we spend right now. The common perception in a downturn or in a time of crisis is to pull back your marketing efforts. And that's not just small businesses. That's all the way up to Ford and GM. Yeah. The common mindset is to pull back, to recoil from your marketing efforts. And that has proven to be across the board a mistake. And in fact, right now, because of that conventional mindset to pull back, there is literally a vacuum of the kind of advertising anybody does in the marketplace. So in other words, every dollar you spend right now on marketing is more valuable in terms of the number of eyes that will see your message or hear your message or whatever will have an opportunity to respond to your message more now than ever. So every advertising dollar you spend right now is more valuable than ever because there's so little other advertising going on right now while so your message stands out. So
And that,
from
go ahead.
one last quick thought, Josh, think in terms of digital advertising, right? Pay-per-click advertising or retargeting. Here's a great example. I've got the same company retargeting me on every website I go to that is using Google Display. Instead of the 20 companies that retarget me, there's one or two. The other 18 have pulled back on their retargeting budget.
Yep.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I was going to say, and so right now isn't a time to stop your marketing, and it's a time to continue it in the smart way and realize, like you said, every dollar you spend on your marketing right now is worth more to your business and to you, but also that sort of compounds. Every person who responds now has less people talking to them in their ear. So every motivated seller is hearing from less people. They're hearing less, offers and hearing less noise in the marketplace. So now isn't the time to recoil. It's the time to move forward with caution, but move forward and continue and track things and be watching how you do it. But right now, PPC is cheaper than it's ever been. Advertising space is cheaper than it's ever been over the last couple of weeks because of that recoil. So it's a good time if you have a small budget, start testing some things.
Now, as far as I know, direct mail hasn't gotten any cheaper. And as far as I know, I think they snuck some funding in for the Postal Service into this bailout bill, which kind of dirty, but not knocking the postal system. But maybe because they got a bunch of funding, maybe I'm kidding. There's not going to be any breaks there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I can assure you that you will see far fewer junk mail in your mailbox for the next who knows how long.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Josh.
I've got one. It's a doozy, but it's a very specific deal question, so I figured I'd try to get through it here. It's from Moses. He says, "Hey Cam, I have the following questions on one potential seller. The seller is a super senior gentleman. He has several houses, 2 to 4. He wants to sell, but he would like to sell one particular house first. He's asking $275. The reason he's selling is he wants to cash out. He asked me if I wanted to live in it myself. I said, no, I'm an investor. I do not think he was happy about that. He said that he would give a discount to cash buyers. When I asked him how much of a discount he would offer, he told me to make him an offer. Anyway, after a couple of days, I told him that if he could send me all the houses he has, then I could look at all of them and probably buy all these houses from the seller with POF, proof of funds, after I do my due diligence, and also provide that all of us come to a mutual satisfactory agreement. I, however, have not heard from him since a few days, and I don't know the condition of the other houses. The one he wants to sell is in good shape, but it has a swimming pool. What are your thoughts on the seller, and what do you think I should do? Please advise."
Well, first of all, my thought is that he's got an issue with you being an investor and making money on his house. You may not ever fix that. However, I would suggest that now, and I don't know when you sent that, but in the time that's lapsed since then, he may start to think you're the only buyer out there. So, I would continue to pursue that, and I would look to. By the way, if it were me, in my next conversation with him, I would say, "Hey, listen, clearly you have an issue with me being an investor, and that just as clearly means I am going to make money on this deal. If you have a problem with that, let's get that out on the table right now. It's the white elephant in the room. Address it." Yep. I had a deal, by the way. I was literally driving to closing, and some communication, I don't know, the seller was an older gal, and she found out that I was an investor like the day before or day of closing, I forget, 11th hour, and she bailed on the deal. The thought of me not moving into her house, and I guess it just never came up, was so untenable to her, she bailed on the deal. Well, then long story short, she ended up losing the house to foreclosure. So sometimes people's biases are powerful enough to, cloud their ability to think clearly. So I would get that out on the table, and I wouldn't be surprised if you end up being the only buyer in town that he's talking to.
Yep. I also think that if you have the ability to calculate what your offer should be on the one house that you know about, make the offer, because maybe he doesn't believe that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So make him an offer. He's probably not going to like it because it's already in good shape, and you're an investor and you got to find a way to make money on this. And Moses, I understand what you're saying is I could make money on the other three. So if he tells me about all the deals, maybe I can make a lot less or nothing on this one, and it would be worth it as a package deal. Explain that when you submit your offer to them. But sometimes submitting your offer to someone they need, even if it's not one that they're going to accept right away, people need to know you're real. He's had talked to other people who've said they want to buy it, but they never followed through. So being able to make that first offer might help.
Exactly. I'm actually looking in my email because I was expecting something from an attorney here in town that I asked him for, and sadly he answered my question with a question. So I just responded to that. Okay, so moving along, let me go back to where we were here. Stuart, you're up. Stuart says, I have a deal that's supposed to close on April 1. Well, that was yesterday. And now I'm about to do what I don't like. I'm going to answer your question with a question. Did it close? And there's some facts about it in here, but I'm curious now, did it close? If you're on watching this, would you please put that in the comments? I'm very eager to know, and I read all those comments for sure. So it was a contract assignment. And the buyer was waiting till the last day of the contract or of his contract. So, presumably April 1 was the last day of your contract with your buyer. Hopefully April 5 was the last day of your contract with your seller. Is it customary for the buyer to wait till the last day? Yeah, I wouldn't call that unusual. It's pretty rare that a buyer closes before the date in the contract, and even if it says on or before such and such date, which many do, it's pretty unusual for them to close before. So I don't find particularly alarming. The numbers here are great. The house has an after repair value of $240, $50,000 in repairs. Stuart has it under contract for $136. He's doing an assignment for $17,000. So the buyer comes up with $153. Nice profit. The numbers look great, and I hope it closed. And I'm curious to hear if it did or not. So again, Stuart, if you're on here, please put in the comments whether that closed or not. I'd be very curious, and I hope it did. I hope you're mildly intoxicated right now, celebrating that closing. I'm kidding, but hope that one worked out. All right, go ahead, Josh.
This is joint venture and affiliate partnerships can be beneficial to all parties. Do you have any recommendations on how to best find these opportunities? How to do the market research? This applies to most any kind of businesses, but especially in real estate.
Yeah, I saw that there. That was Barbara, right?
Yep.
Go ahead. You first.
Yeah. So I was going to say, typically with affiliate relationships, both parties bring something to the table. So one example of an affiliate style relationship in real estate is a co-wholesale. There's two parties, you've got the buyer and I've got the property and the seller, and we co-wholesale it. I'm trying to think of other types of affiliate relationships in the real estate space. Do you have any that jump out off the top of your head there?
Partners.
Yeah.
Money partners where you're sharing in the profit. Private lenders, it's a bit of a joint venture, really. You've got a relationship and they're lending you the money collateralized by the house. So it's a smart and well-protected investment, but it's going to be based in some part, if not in large part, on your relationship with that person. So that really kind of makes it you two have joined up in this venture. So I think one of the things that I think is going to come out of this is Our rates are at historic lows. By the way, if you look at what money markets and the T-bill and all the types of, sort of fixed, the types of investments that people on fixed incomes make, those rates are down, down, down. I would expect to see CDs declining now. I haven't looked in a couple weeks, but I did look at that when I was negotiating the interest rate with the private lender on the deal I just did. But I expect one of the things to come out of this is a greater desire on the part of people who are, in particular, living on a fixed income and who are risk adverse, to be looking for a way to make more money on their money, because savers, that's the category. Savers they're being eviscerated right now. It's awful what the rates are. So there's where you can join in a venture with a private lender or many of them to help them earn more on their money, and you do more real estate deals. So that's what I got on that. Kevin, how do you get a house under contract? I'm in one of those states where you're not supposed to leave. DocuSign, .loop, on the phone, email, Zoom meeting, whatever you're doing, to get to the place where you reach an agreement verbally, and now you need to put it on paper. DocuSign or .loop, very easy, very inexpensive to use, and frankly, if you are now, or you intend to be a virtual investor, that's a tool you need to get used to. Yeah. I don't think I've done a real estate transaction in a couple of years at least where it wasn't entirely on DocuSign or .loop or one of those digital signature tools. The use of a tool like this. Okay, so we're on Facebook Live right now, but the tool that Josh and I are using so that you can see the two of us and that has the two of us in a conference is called Zoom, or zoom.us. And I'd encourage you to use that with sellers. It's free. You can get a free account, and as long as you don't have more than 3 people on at any given time, there's almost no limitations. You can have a 2-hour meeting, as many meetings as you want, but when you start putting more people on, then they start to limit how long you can be on their free account. This is a paid account, so I have a little more latitude, but the free account is all you need to have a face-to-face meeting with a seller. And now some sellers are going to be a little tech averse, the technophobes, and maybe this is beyond them. And then others are going to be comforted by the fact that they can see you and look at you, and you're a human to them and not just some voice on the other end of us, on the other end of this. Or maybe you use FaceTime. That's another thing. Yeah. Or you could do a Zoom meeting with. You can
use Zoom on your phone too.
Yeah, you can. You definitely can. It's a little teeny bit wonkier, but it, like most mobile versions of everything, it's not quite there, but it's just good. I think I mentioned this on our last call. We're doing Zoom cocktail parties, my buddies. I have a whole bunch of friends in this area that, we're all part of this club, a real club, 110-year-old club. And we're disbanded. We can't meet together. And my wife is like, man, you just can't stand to be away from your friends. And I was like, well, I thrive on camaraderie. So we're having Zoom cocktail parties. And it's hilarious, by the way. It's not quite like being in the same room. But nobody's sticking their hand in my bowl of pretzels either. So,
right.
This is a great tool.
I think the percentage of the population that wouldn't have been okay with a Zoom meeting or a version FaceTime, whatever, has drastically decreased. I mean, I didn't like doing FaceTime until last week because I was so bored that I gave in to finally putting my face on the screen with friends, sitting on my couch talking to them for a while. So a giant percentage of the population, because what we're going through, is becoming okay with it. And a lot of your sellers will be too.
Indeed. Things are changing, and this concept of virtual meetings, virtual gatherings is another one of those things that's going to become normal from this. There's no doubt in my mind. Kevin goes on, how are we supposed to get a look inside the house? Well, if you're unable to get in and you're unable to send a bird dog or someone else to go look at the house and take you on a FaceTime or a Zoom tour, then that does present a challenge. And what you could do is make your contract contingent upon a live visual inspection. And maybe that simply means that you don't close for a little longer than you'd normally would, and the contract has a longer life. And what I was checking my email for is, and I don't think I'm going to have it for this particular strategy lab, but I hope to have it for next, is in New York, they're using language. It's COVID-19 language. It's like a COVID-19 addendum. And it basically says, hey, we're in the middle of COVID-19. If we can't close on the date we're supposed to close, it's okay. Everybody's okay with that. And that doesn't mean the contract is null and void. It just means we'll close this as quickly as possible, and everybody, remains operating in good faith. But what that does is it gives you more time to shop the deal, because once you have it under contract, you have control of it. And if that's a long-term contract, like maybe instead of normal 30 days, it's 60 or 90, that gives you a longer period of time that you have control over the house and more time to resell it if that's your goal. And I for one thing, I think that works to our advantage. Yeah. I've always felt and said that the longer you have to close, if you're wholesaling, the better. The problem is if you're dealing with a bank seller, they're not going to let you go past 30 days. If you're dealing with a private seller who's got a situation, they need to close a week from Thursday or a week from today, that's a hair on fire situation. But with this, everything's sort of all hair on fire emergencies are now on hold, and everybody understands that. And that's what this COVID-19 addendum speaks to. And so I hope to have that next week. And I'm sure I'll probably have it, later today, but I'll read it to you, or we'll post it, or we'll do something so you have access to it, so you can begin to see that, there's language that's being universally adopted that works to everyone's benefit, including yours, by giving you more time. And that's a good thing.
Yep. One of the questions that I just looked at was from David. He said, should we be making offers with longer due diligence periods, given that it may be harder to find cash buyer investors? And I think that there's lots of reasons why a longer due diligence period right now might be in order. And certainly you can. I mean, what you got to remember is sellers who know that they have 10 other people coming to buy their house and are going to give them a 30-day, window to get the thing closed, might say no to you. But right now there's a lot less people making offers just because of that fear thing. So make the offer with a longer window there, or use, by the way, I keep forgetting we're on Facebook Live. If having the addendum to add to your purchase and sales agreement would give you giant amount of confidence that Cam was just talking about, comment yes below. Let us know that addendum would be awesome. And I know that you're waiting to hear from an attorney on that, but I do think that something like that would be very powerful. It would give a lot of people the confidence to continue making offers. And that's what you need to be doing right now, is making offers, because the magic formula that Cam's always talked about is make more offers, do more deals, has not changed. This didn't change that. Just like it doesn't change the R formula. That is still the formula for success in real estate. Make offers, close deals. So what do you need to make more offers? You're going to need the confidence to be able to put the stuff together in the DocuSign document and hit send to send it to your seller. And that addendum may give you, it's like a giant confidence boost right into your contracts. So if you guys want that, comment that you want it below. Let us know, and we'll try to get it together by the next session.
We'll get it. We may be able to get it to you before the next session too. So Kevin had one more thing in here. It says, I'm working on a house for sale and saw pictures, and what you see on the MLS inside is not what I'm seeing. So he's saying, if you trust the pictures that someone sends you of a property and you go ahead and close without someone actually doing a visual inspection, I agree that would be a mistake, because someone might misrepresent the condition of the property. And so I'm not going to close based on still photos. And by the way, that reminds me, here's a little tech tool recommendation. I just heard about this. I haven't actually used it yet, but I just heard about it. It's called Yaza, YAZA video app. So if you go to your app store, whether you're on, iOS or Android, actually, I think it may only be available for iOS, but they were working on Android. It is a video application tool that's sort of like, it's a little bit like FaceTime, and I think that you can join me for the video. But what happens is when I shoot a video of the inside of a house or anything, it time and date stamps it in a way that I can never, ever change the time and date stamp on that. And it provides a location as part of the data that's being captured, so that I can for sure know when the video was taken and where the video was taken. Now, how that applies to us as real estate investors is really interesting. For example, let's say you're doing a rehab 1,000 miles away and your contractor says, hey, I got the kitchen done. I'm ready for the next draw, or I need a check. And you say, all right, well, send me a video. I want to check it out. The contractor could go in some other house and shoot you a video of a kitchen that is not in your house. And now you send him a check for $32,000 and you find out there's no kitchen in your house and the contractor's gone. That's one application. Another is you could say to the seller or realtor, shoot me a video of the interior, be thorough, and send it to me, and they can't fake it. So there's this concept called deep fakes, right? Where with video editing now, people can fake stuff that is, incredible. I mean, they can literally take a video of you or me and mimic my mouth movements and have me and my voice and have me say things that I'm not saying. So this concept of deep fakes is kind of scary. Sorry, Josh, what were we saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, and with the deep fakes, they can make you say things you've never said. It's not like they take an old saying and have you say it now. They'll make you say things you've never said, and I've seen some of those deep fakes where they make, like, politicians, if they have enough video, the computer can take all the different movements of their mouth and sounds for the words and create anything they want it to say. So deep fakes are a thing. And most of us aren't going to ever be, subject to the deep faking community, at least right now. But the ability to, like you said, time and date stamp those pictures so no one can fake you out, location stamp, that's pretty cool. Especially right now, we're all in a bubble, and being able to do that could help give you a little more confidence.
And what I see happening is a lot of us are letting our guard down because we're fearful. And we need to be careful with that. I've read a thing that, these scammers are calling people saying, okay, we have your $1,200 check. I'm calling from the Treasury. Please give me your banking information and we'll wire it directly to your account.
Lots of people are doing it. Yeah.
No. So keep your guard up. Even when that feels maybe a little out of place, keep your guard up.
Yep. I've got one here.
Go ahead.
All right. This is from Brett. He said, I'm in limbo financially, making sure I feed my son, pay the mortgage, etc. In addition to driving for dollars and skip tracing or using vacant house data feed, motivated data feed, and networking. What is the best use of my time and limited money to find more sellers? So you listed a lot of things that you could be doing, going through the vacant house data feed, motivated seller data feed, skip tracing, driving for dollars. Those are all good things to be doing right now, Brett. And I totally understand the limbo, looking at your finances, knowing you have to feed your family. I mean, that's what everybody in the world's doing right now. So you're not alone there. The good news is you have access to lots of tools. What's the best bang for your buck right now? Well, it doesn't cost you anything to sit down for an hour or nearly nothing and start dialing motivated seller data feed people or vacant house data feed people and using the filters within the system to find the most motivated people right now. And what does that mean? Well, I've done tons of trainings on the motivated seller data feed and at our live events. I do this as well, but play with the filters. Go to people who haven't sold their house in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. Go to folks who have a lot of equity in their property, or who have multiple layers of motivation. That aren't just vacant, but they're vacant, absent, and have a tax lien on them. Those are the types of people who are ultra motivated. And so if you have limited time and limited budget, you want to make the least amount of phone calls with the most amount of benefit to you. Using tools like that, whether you use the data feeds that we provide or somebody else's, using filters to get down to a more targeted group of people to go after is what you do when you're on a shoestring budget. And whether that's a shoestring of time or a shoestring of money, that's what I would suggest.
Good. All right. Cliff said, how do you do deals when everything closed? We've certainly addressed that a lot. Also, how are you dealing with eviction rules? I just had to deal with it, and it took 3 months to get my property back, only to have to do repairs from damage done deliberately. Clearly, that took place before or in the lead up to where we are now, if that eviction's complete. And I would say to you that if you managed to do that in 3 months, you probably didn't do all that bad. Here in New York, which is a very tenant-friendly state, it could take much longer, especially if the tenant knows how to work the system, claim bankruptcy, claim hardship, all this stuff. My advice is if you're dealing with non-paying tenants right now, push it to the lender. Get a mortgage deferral on your loan. So let the non-paying tenant and then be that landlord who is okay with that because you got your ducks in a row. So, if your payment was sucked out of your account on the 1st of April, okay, so work on a 3-month deferral starting in May. But kick that can down the road to the best of your ability. And the other piece of advice, and this is timeless, is choose your tenants wisely, because 1 month of vacancy would have been less expensive waiting for the right tenant than 3 months of effective vacancy, during the process of evicting that tenant, and then the cost to do the repairs. Choosing tenants is usually something we tend, or inexperienced landlords tend to do with haste, because they think, oh no, I got a mortgage payment coming, I got to get this thing occupied, and take the wrong tenant. Where I'd rather eat that mortgage payment and take the right tenant than eat 3 months of vacancy, effective vacancy, and the repairs, if you follow my logic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Here's one from Charlie. He said, is there a book that you have for iFlip? The videos are great, but I like to have a book that could tell me how to do things within the system. So iFlip is a CRM that we use to manage our real estate business. Helps us do deals virtually. It's actually built by Cam, for Cam and his virtual investing business. No, just short answer, no. We do not have a book that you can follow. In fact, you're the first person who's ever requested a book to learn how to use iFlip. But I get that we all learn differently. What I would suggest to you are A, the videos, which you've already said you like. B, contact our client support. Reach out to them, 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. They're there. They can answer any questions you have on iFlip. You can chat with them right from the iFlip page, live chat with them. You can email them, info@realestatewealthnetwork.com. So utilize and lean on the support and our great support team to help you with that.
There you go. All right, Daryl, you're up. Asking about earnest money. When I put up an earnest money deposit, can I do that in the form of cash, or can it be a check? And would the title company not cash the check unless the deal is closed? So generally, you wouldn't put up an earnest money deposit in cash. I don't prefer to do that, although if I'm dealing with a private seller and the earnest money deposit is $20, I'm probably going to whip out a $20 bill and have them sign. And presumably the contract has some sort of receipt of or evidence that's been received by the seller. Most contracts have language in there like that. But in almost every case, certainly every case, if there's a realtor involved, you're going to use a check. And in general, the realtor should not cash the check until the seller accepts your offer and you have a binding bilateral ratified agreement. So your check remains uncashed until the deal is ratified, meaning you and the seller have signed the contract. And then that'll get held in the realtor's escrow account. Now, if you're dealing with a private seller and there's no realtor involved, you would provide the earnest money to deposit to the closing agent, the title company, or the attorney. They'll hold that in their escrow account or their trust account. And yes, that'll get cashed, just because that's how it works. But again, I wouldn't even hand them that check if there's no realtor involved now until you have an agreement with the seller signed by you both. Next question regarding lockboxes. Would I hold any liability to the seller if I used a lockbox and gave the code to buyers and something happened to the property? Maybe someone got hurt or damage or theft. It's a fair question. I don't know the answer. I'm not an attorney. I've never had that happen. And in general, the houses that I'm buying and putting my lockbox on, meaning it's a private seller, no realtor involved, are ones that are vacant and in very, rundown condition. They're junkers. And so there's really nothing to steal. Or if there's a range with an inch of caked on grease, you can hope, and the seller could probably hope that someone does steal that.
Right.
I'm being
I've had houses like that before where I pray that people take the things out of it.
Right. I'm not an attorney. I just have a lot of direct experience. I don't worry about that. And I think any issue would really fall on the seller's insurance anyway, because they're the title holder and it's their property. Them giving you access and you giving someone else access was their call.
Yeah. And I almost always try to get the seller out of the house in one way or another when I have people going in to look at it. I would never put a lockbox on a house where the seller is still in the house, because then, it's just, someone walks in at the wrong time.
That's strictly for vacant houses.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you made that distinction.
You bet.
All right. We've got just a couple minutes left here and we're going to wrap it up. Go ahead, Josh, take your next one.
All right. This is a question, and I'm not actually sure on the answer, so you're going to have to help me brainstorm this one. But it's from Brett. He said, just so folks are clear on the difference between a deferred mortgage payment and a forbearance program, can you please cover this? I learned the hard way after the 2016 hurricanes in Florida. The mortgage company I had at the time was very misleading, and I blindly trusted them. If this helps one person, I believe it was worth discussing.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Saw that one from you there, Brett. I have a little bit of a bone to pick on this myself right now. So I was offered and I accepted let me just find that question because I want to make sure. There it is. And was offered a 3-month deferral. And in my conversation with the lender and the people in there that I know and have worked with and have a closer relationship with for 10 years or 12 years, I understood that to mean that the mortgage was put on pause and that interest would not continue to accrue. In my mind, that's what a forbearance is, where you continue to accrue interest and it's put on the end of the loan. So in effect, your mortgage balance goes up. And in effect, the lender doesn't share in this at all because they're still collecting or at least keeping that interest on their balance sheet. And so they're not feeling any of the pain at all. And so then as we got down to the paperwork to do this deferral, I came to learn that in fact, interest would continue to accrue. It was in the document. And I thought, well, that's not what I thought we agreed to. So I called the lender and they said, well, yeah, but your balance doesn't go up. And I said, well, how could it not? And he said, well, because we're going to hold that aside and you can pay that interest when you can. So your payment will resume based on your previous principal balance, and the interest portion of the payment will be applied to interest, and the principal reduction portion of the payment will be applied to reducing the principal. And I said, and then I can pay that interest off when I can, right? And yes. And I said, well, then how is my balance not going up if I owe you that? Oh, well, it's not. Okay, so it's not compounding. So we're not putting the interest on the tail of the loan and raising your principal balance and then calculating your interest based on this new higher principal balance. There is no compounding. This just becomes a set aside cost. And I said, okay, it doesn't compound, but I'm still going to owe it. And so now I took the deal, but it's not done being negotiated, and they know it. I'm still working on it. In fact, I sent them, I got a notice that if you have an SBA type E7 or some type of SBA, I don't have one, in parentheses 7 loan, they're basically putting the whole loan on pause, no interest accruing, no payments for 6 months. And I sent that over to him and I said, here's what I thought we agreed to. Here's an example of where it's happening. And I'm going to continue to push that because, and I have the kind of relationship with this lender where I have some leverage, but I may end up owing that. So Brett, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between a deferral and a forbearance is, because what I thought a deferral was turned out not to be with this particular lender. And I will keep you apprised to how that plays out. I'm not going to name the lender here because I don't think that would be fair. And I feel confident that I'm going to get this thing negotiated because they offered me 3 months deferral. And then at the end of 3 months, if I need another 3 months, they'll do another 3. And at the end of 6 months, I need another 3, they'll do another 3. So I've been promised basically to this point, as many as 9 months, but that's, what's that? Probably $150,000 and $140,000 in interest that I will accumulate, or additional debt that I'll accumulate, while everybody else is, or maybe not everybody, but a lot of places are being, offered no payments and no interest accruing. So, little bit of a sensitive spot for me right now.
Sure.
So anyway,
and I think the takeaway from that, Brett, and it's a good point to make for those of you out there who are landlords or who are looking at getting deferrals on your mortgage payments, however large, make sure that you look at the details of that, because what they're going to tell you to get you to do it is different from what they're going to spell out in the in the documentation that you're going to sign. So definitely look at the fine print on that.
Yeah. There wasn't any fine print when I finally got the agreement. In fact, it was only 2 paragraphs.
Wow.
So, all right. Sorry, I'm choking a little. I took too big a sip of water. We're going to wrap it up. We're trying to keep these to about 90 minutes. Thank you for joining us. If you're on the Facebook Live, again, throw in a like and give us a comment. By the way, if you have an example of a deep fake video, throw that in there. I'd love to see it. And if you're watching this on the blog, having been previously pre-recorded, please do share your comments with us below. Your comments literally are the fuel that make this happen. And so we're counting on that. As much as you are hoping to hear from us, I am hoping to hear from you. So please provide me with that feedback. My wife says I need a lot of validation. I'm not really sure I know what that means, but maybe she's right. So we will do this again next week. We're going to continue to do this for the foreseeable future. So plan on joining us live on Facebook next Thursday, what's the date on that? Let me look real quick. Today. So a week from today would be April 9th.
Yep.
So plan to join us at noon for a Facebook Live then. And also be sure to get your questions and comments submitted to comments, COMMENTS, at realestatewealthnetwork.com. And we will aggregate those to the best of our ability, try to, group them together, the ones that are similar, and we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can. If we did not get to your question today or last week or next week, please don't take it personally. It's just, we're doing the best we can. We're a little overwhelmed. but our desire is to answer every single one of them if we can. So,
Yep.
Josh, you got any final comments before we wrap it up?
This was a lot of fun. Again, hopefully you guys enjoyed it and learned a little something and got some motivation to get out there and start moving forward. And again, send your comments to comments at Real Estate Wealth Network. It's below you. You can see it down there on the screen, and look forward to talking to everybody next week. So take care, be safe, be healthy, and we'll talk next Thursday.
All right, and so that's a wrap. I will continue to watch the news and read what I read and listen to what I listen and distill that down, so I continue to bring you the things that I think are most important to you and me as real estate investors. The vast amount of news that's out there really, I guess it applies to us in some ways, but I'm the one that's digging through trying to find the stuff that really applies to us as investors. So. Yeah. Thank you for being part of our family. Thank you for joining us here, and we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
All righty.